Milton Friedman said that you cannot simultaneously have free immigration and a welfare state. Our first speaker, Robert Rector, Senior Research Fellow at the Heritage Foundation, has provided the data to substantiate that assertion. Dubbed the intellectual godfather of welfare reform by National Review Policy editor Rich Lowry, Robert Rector played a major role in the crafting of the 1996 federal welfare reform legislation, and his penetrating analyses of the 2006 and 2007 comprehensive immigration reform bills provided the ammunition to kill these attempts to legalize the status of 12 to 20 million lawbreakers, that is, amnesty. For once, syndicated columnist Robert Novak wrote, the Senate was moved by a think tank report. Just the facts. His landmark reports, Importing Poverty, Immigration and Poverty in the United States, a book of charts, and the fiscal cost of low-skilled immigrants to the U.S. taxpayers, did this along with domestic policy analyst Christine Kim, documented the true cost of immigration to the taxpayer. Also, his recent September 2009 report, Obama to spend $10.3 trillion on welfare, uncovering the full cost of means-tested welfare or aid to the poor, revealed the magnitude of means-tested welfare or aid to the poor and low-income persons and the impact of low-skilled immigration and an amnesty on these costs. It is my pleasure to introduce the Godfather.
You know, when you talk about immigration within conservative ranks, the basic reality is that conservatives are divided between what I would call common sense conservatives and open border libertarians. And the reality is that open border libertarians control very key points of access, such as the Wall Street Journal, and they have policies that not only are very economically destructive, I think they actually spell the end of democracy in the United States as we currently understand it. If we were to look at the immigration agenda and debate, we could start just by outlining what I would call the Obama, McCain, Bush immigration agenda. Okay? There's very little difference between Bush and Obama on these issues. And there are really three elements to this agenda. The first is, if you look at the 2006 Act, the Comprehensive Immigration Reform Act, what that effectively did was eliminate all controls on the number of legal immigrants coming into the United States. And at that time, I produced a paper that showed that the actual provisions in that act, and I was one of like 5 people who actually read the act at the time, maybe 8, would have allowed up to 100 million immigrants to enter the United States over the next 20 years. And my favorite thing was when Fox News would challenge Republican senators on that, they'd say, well, that's not true. And they'd ask them, well, how many people will it let in? And they'd say, I don't know, you know. Why do you ask me? You know, I'm just voting for it, you know. God, you gotta love this city. The second thing that all these acts have is what I call the pseudo guest worker. Okay, temporary guest workers who are not temporary and are not guests. Okay, it's guest workers for life with citizenship and access to welfare is what that means. And when they use the word guest worker, you know that they have to lie because their policy is so bad they don't want to know anyone to know what they're doing. So effectively, it's unlimited, and it's part of this unlimited flow that they would let in. And then finally, amnesty with full voting rights, full citizenship, full access to the U.S. welfare system, you know, and they call this earned citizenship. You know, you pay a $2,000 fine. Can you believe that? A $2,000 fine. Now, when you pay that $2,000 fine, you have access to about $1.5 million in government benefits. Pretty good deal. Also, we now know the price of U.S. citizenship. It's worth about $2,000. Okay? I get for Obama, it's probably negative, okay? But it certainly isn't worth more than $2,000. And it's a pretty good deal. Cheat, break our laws, we give you $1.5 million, you pay $2,000. Good deal, good deal. But I think what we didn't get to discuss in the panel in the larger room is, and I would like to talk about, is the fundamental misunderstanding about the economics of immigration. Okay, if you listen to the Wall Street Journal, for example, they say immigration builds the U.S. economy. Of course it does. If you add more laborers into an economy, it gets bigger. Duh, okay? Wow, needed a PhD for that one, didn't you? Okay? But the question is not, did it make the pie bigger? It's, did the average income of the average U.S. citizen go up or down? Okay? The way to illustrate this is, okay, you add more workers in, and like, let's say you have a pizza to start out, you got 10 people sharing the pizza. And now we made a bigger pizza, right? Bigger GDP. And now it's 10% bigger than the last pizza, but gee, we've now got 11 people sharing the pizza. So everyone's share of the pizza was exactly the same, okay? And that's almost every discussion of immigration either is people that are deliberately deceptive or they don't understand that basic point. So the goal of immigration economically should be higher post-tax incomes for the average American. But when you talk to libertarians about that, they say, no, that's weird. Who would want that goal, you know? All we want is a bigger GDP, even if it makes the average American substantially worse off, which is what I believe the current flows of immigration are doing. Part of the problem of current immigration is not only that it's at a very high level, but that the immigrants coming in are dramatically lower skilled than the average American worker. 60% of illegals are high school dropouts, 50, 60%. And overall, when you add the illegals and legals together, you're still at around 30, 40% are high school dropouts. Very, very remarkable. We've never done that kind of thing in the past in our country. And the reality is what we're doing is we're basically importing poor welfare recipients. You know, if you had, in the last 15 years, we've imported about 10 to 12 million high school dropouts from abroad. We brought them in. Now, if you had 10 or 12 million people born in Kentucky that ended up as high school dropouts, what would everyone say? Wow, that sounds like a social disaster. That sounds like a huge cost to the taxpayer. But somehow when the high school dropout comes from Guatemala, then according to the Wall Street Journal, he's the key to a high-tech future, okay? It's just nonsense. A high school dropout is a high school dropout is a high school dropout. Now, if you believe that a high school dropout now or at any time in the future is going to pay more in taxes than they take in government benefits, then this is a good idea for the taxpayer. But if you have a nagging suspicion that that might not be the case, then you might think, wow, I wonder what this costs. If you believe that reducing the average education level of the average American worker is a good thing for the future of our economy, then this is a great policy. But if you think, wow, that doesn't sound exactly right, then you may think that maybe this policy is wrong and it's getting worse. Now, the reality is that when you have a high school dropout or even an immigrant who's a high school graduate, but let's focus on the dropout for a second, they receive on average, and this data comes directly computed out of the Census Bureau, it's not made up, it's based on what these individuals actually say they receive in terms of welfare, other government services, and so forth. They receive about $3 in government benefits for every $1 in taxes they pay in. They receive on average a high school dropout immigrant household. It doesn't matter whether it's immigrant or non-immigrant. It's the high school dropouts per se get about $30,000 in government benefits, and they pay about $10,000 in taxes. So there's a gap there. Those of you who are arithmetically inclined, you can say 30, 10. I wonder who pays the difference. And the reality is that the difference being paid is paid by the American taxpayer. $20,000 a year, the equivalent of buying a free car for these families each and every year. And so when a high school dropout immigrant, particularly if they're legal, crosses the border and comes into the United States and forms a family and settles here, the cost to the taxpayer over the course of the lifetime, net cost, is about $1 million. It requires one college-educated family in the United States. It takes their entire surplus tax burden. Doesn't go to defense, doesn't go to the debt. It goes one entire college-educated family to pay for one low-skill immigrant family.